that is how they look. I ended up having just enough left over. Looks like a smiley face. And then I had a huge mess. It was like a Lifetime horror movie.
You making pizza? I feel like it smells like the sauce.
I'm making pizza sauce.
Oh, yeah. Oh, it sounds good. It sounds like
I'm cleaning out the frozen vegetables out of our deep freezer. Oh man. I'm gonna have to make 2 trips. I also have the strawberries we grew last year, and blueberries from when we went blueberry picking. So it's time. I'm gonna go ahead and put these in the sink and let them defrost overnight, and then we'll be back tomorrow. So here we are. It looks like that they've defrosted pretty good. They've shrunk down significantly. And the first thing I'm going to do is dump out all this water. It's mostly water. There's really very little juice there from the tomatoes. And then I've peeled off all the skins and put them into our electric water bath canner. I have 3 cans of tomato paste that I'm going to be adding. We like the sauce to be a little bit thicker. I just stir that in and turn the canner up to like between medium and high and just continuously keep stirring it. Now my plan was to leave it there while I do other things, and I noticed quickly that it was burning on the bottom. Now I've made jam in this before and I had no problem with it, so I decided that I will use the crock pot. I had the crock pot upstairs and it was easily accessible for me, so I moved everything over to the crock pot and I just had it on low and kept stirring it occasionally, but it was nice because I could just let it sit there. I don't really remember how long it took, but I was doing multiple things throughout the day. Once it was cooked down pretty good, I ended up grabbing my food mill and running it through the food mill. This is my favorite way to make sauces. I don't use it a lot because usually I'm making large batches of tomato sauce and it takes a very long time, but this is not a lot, and I was able to easily run it through the food mill. Afterwards, I just put it back into the crock pot to continue cooking down. I got as much of the tomatoes off of the food mill as I could and put that back in the crock pot as well. All that was really left in there was just mostly skins and seeds, and I put that right in the compost. And then I had a huge mess. It was like a Lifetime horror movie around the crock pot. So I went ahead and I cleaned it up, and now I am going to let this cook down a little bit more. The consistency is really good for what I like on a pizza sauce. And by this point it's almost 8 o'clock at night and I'm exhausted. I decided to put the pizza sauce into a container to move into our fridge overnight. I took this as an opportunity to measure how many cups of tomato sauce we have, and it came out to be about 13 cups. I go ahead and grab the tomato sauce out of the refrigerator and put it back into the crock pot to reheat. I just put it on low. This is the electric water bath canner that Steve bought me a while ago. I put water in it and got it ready to use as the canner today. I'm using the pizza sauce recipe from the ball book on page 364 as a guide. The recipe calls for 1/2 cup of lemon juice. I used bottled lemon juice. I believe it had a best by date of a month prior, so I added a little bit extra just to make sure the acidity was good. And then I stirred that in, and then we added oregano. I added way more than what the recipe called for. Really, you can just season it to how you want. I suggest using the right amount of citric acid or bottled lemon juice to make sure your acidity level is right. But as far as the seasoning goes, you can really do whatever you want and season it to how you like it. So we added in our oregano, garlic powder, black pepper, and salt, and stirred that in really good. And then I decided to taste it to see if I liked it, and I felt like it needed more, so I added another 1/2 tablespoon of oregano and a 1/2 tablespoon of garlic powder. Stirred that in really good. Got the water bath canner filled with water and got it turned up so that it starts to warm up. I started to ladle in the sauce into the jars. I'm using pint-sized jars. And this recipe needs about 1/2 inch of headspace. So that's the space between the top of the jar and the contents inside the jar. And if it's a little too high, then you just spoon some out and get it to the height that you need. So then I proceeded to fill up the pint jars. I really wasn't sure how many I was going to get, so I had some extras ready to go. I ended up having just enough left over. Looks like a smiley face. I ended up just having enough left over for pizza that night. The next thing I did was I took our bubble tool and I got all the bubbles out of each of the jars. I also double checked the headspace. Again, it needed 1/2 inch of headspace, so I just double checked and made sure that it was good. It looked like it needed to be leveled out a little bit. So I just moved the sauce around just to make sure that each one has the right amount. And then I took out all the bubbles again, measure headspace again. If you add liquid, you should get the bubbles out, check the headspace every time you add or remove liquid. The next thing I did was I took a flour sack towel or a lint-free rag and added some distilled white vinegar and cleaned off the rims of the jars. These ones were really messy. I had to go through and really clean it up. Then I take a clean lid. This one's a regular mouth lid because I have 2 regular mouth jars and 4 wide mouth jars. Using just the tips of our fingers, we tighten down the band or the ring around the lid of the jar. You don't crank it down or anything, you just tighten it finger tight. And that's how it looks. And we'll do the rest of them. As you can see, I have to go back and really clean and clean up all the jars. Now that the jars are all ready, I go ahead and start to move them over to the water bath canner. I have it warmed up. There is a metal rack at the bottom and it works pretty much the same as a canner, like the stovetop canner that I have. And then it comes with this divider that I just put on top, and then I put the glass lid on top and then let it come up to temperature. Once it started boiling, I set the timer for 35 minutes. After the 35 minutes was up, I turned off the water bath canner and we let it sit for 5 minutes. Letting it sit for 5 minutes just allows the temperature to cool off. There isn't a huge shock of moving the jars from the very hot canner to the countertop. So far they look pretty good. Doesn't look like any siphoning happened. One by one, I take the jars out. I have a couple towels on the countertop and I just set them there. And they will stay on the countertop for the next day or so, and then I'll move them to the pantry. That is how they look. That'll do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you next time. Bye!
Oh.